minutes for questions, and I would say just fire away at any of the speakers. Yeah, and yeah, raise your hands. I think we've got somebody running a mic to you. You might have to turn that on, Edison. So, any questions for the group? There we go.
Question about your model for Lee. Have you considered a probabilistic model where you could do like a Monte Carlo simulation? So you wouldn't have a static result. You would have a probability distribution, which would be help inform you much better, I guess, and help you make better decisions, I would think.
Yeah, so the question, I guess everyone heard, it's, you know, could we improve on this model, I think, to get a little bit more detailed? Certainly, right? I think there's always possibility to how we model that risk a little bit differently. You know, I think we weighed that partially, at least from a beta version of the first version, of we wanted something that producers can use and make it relatively easy to use. And so I would say, you know, that was our target originally. What I always like to do, and this may be me being naive, you know, I care about the left-hand side of the decimal place, right? And so not to say that improving the model wouldn't change left-hand side of the decimal place, but a lot of times, you know, and I've been doing this long enough, you could put a lot of work in, and all you're affecting is right-hand side of the decimal place. So I think, you know, we're always weighing that. But certainly, you know, I've always released these models and said, you know, this is version 1, and you know, if we're convinced to do multiple versions, you know, that's what we'll be doing to improve the model. So, you know, good point there.
Another question?
You know, that you showed that trend over time. In about 2015, it kind of hockey sticked up. This is back in an earlier talk. The question is, rather than try to figure out today, has anybody gone back systematically and looked at what changed about then that in the industry across genetic companies that seem to have sparked that? Because something appears to have changed. Is there any analysis that's been done, and do you have any inkling of what that might have been?
Yeah, good question. You know, I think a lot of people have spent a lot of time thinking about what's caused mortality to change, particularly in sows in the last decade or 2 decades. And you know, there's been a few things, but when you go back on it and really evaluate those particular items, such as higher inclusion of DDGs, you know, it just doesn't, we just can't get any legs underneath any of the things that we think might have been. I don't know if there's other perspectives. Noel or Chris, any other thoughts on that? Lee?
Yeah, I think if you looked at that line, and you know, as I look back, and we did try to do a retrospective analysis. You know, buildings are 6 years older. If you plotted sow genetic potential for total born and born alive, it follows the same line. I think most genetic companies would, so an increase in productivity. I think if you look, and I don't know the exact year, labor has always been an issue, but somewhere around 2018, 2019, that line is not going, well, I guess your number of employees or open positions has gone up. You know, it's hard to look back at those things and pinpoint one certain thing. You know, that it would be easy to do, and I know we've done a lot of, you know, urinary metabolites, markers for prolapses and those types of things, and nothing just pops out. I think it's a combination of a lot of changes over the last 6 years. Genetic, environment, feed, people, it's all of the above.
We got one in the front here real quick.
I have a question for Dr. Ross, but first I also have a comment. Isn't that increase in productivity also telling us that the sow may need more care in the last part of the gestation, and we just have to leave it her with the same care? Just she's at risk of dying, and we're just having the same people looking after her. But the question is, is it possible that the differences in bacteria population that you're seeing is more the effect of the score 3 instead of the cause, just because it's being more exposed, and that's why nothing else
that's
changing?
you make a good point there. That's the limitation of that work that we've done so far in that area is the way we've set those studies up. It does not allow us to determine cause and effect. And so maybe there's strategies, right? If you could go take microflora from sows that are at high risk, right, and then infuse that and see if you could inoculate a sow earlier in gestation and see if that increases the probability that they manifest as a high-risk sow, that would be a better way to describe what you're talking about to determine if it's a cause or effect or if that inoculation can induce the phenotype. So that's a good point. There's very much correlation data at this point. So we had a question up here in the front real quick.
Really quick, Noel, one of the things that you mentioned when you were doing those necropsies was that you found a lot of feed in the stomach, and you bolded it, and I just was curious what does that mean? What was the connection there? Is there any?
So a little bit of that is history. I don't know if Luke Dufresne is in here. I see Jim. We did a big round of this, I think, back in 2002, 2003. When Luke and I were at PIC and Piva was here. And in that, we found a lot of sows without feed in the stomach, okay? And really focused on feeding management strategies and changes to eliminate thin sows, but really we had a lot of off-feed sows, right, Piva? And that was one of the things that, if you took that further back, as we went into 2002, it was going up, then it kind of plateaued. And to me, that was just my memory of that initial work, and you could ask Luke and some other guys that were involved in that. And so I was involved in this one, and it was exact opposite. No ulcers, they were not off feed. They ate a lot of feed. So
Right.
I don't know what it means. It was just different. That's
Okay,
It was different. How about that?
very good, thanks.
All right, got one in the back, and then we got one up here after next, Edison.
So I just wanted to follow up on this earlier comment. Did you look at correlation between body condition score and the microbiota from the, again, is there some association that's with body condition score and feeding with the microbiome, and which came first, chicken or the egg kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. We didn't actually look at, how body condition affected the vaginal microflora, but in that original study on the data that we collected, just looking at body condition scores, really thin sows were at a higher probability of dying due to prolapse than sows that were overweight or ideal body condition. But yeah, we haven't gone back. That's a good point. Haven't gone back and looked at the microbiome as it relates to body condition.
My question is about prolapses. I'm from Canada. I deal with a lot of farms that are internal multiplication. Is there any thought process that maternal sow that prolapses, maybe we should just negate those gilts?
Good question. I guess maybe as we figure out a little bit more on the heritability and the relationship between that and the probability that those gilts out of those sows are going to be at higher risk for prolapse, I think, till we get that answer and can wrap our heads around it, I guess I wouldn't make too drastic a decisions at this point. That's my initial thought. I don't know if there's smarter people over here have a better perspective on that.
As you work to focus in on individual sow care and allocating 2 employees for that task, does it change what your thoughts are on employee sow ratio for your farms? I'm curious.
Yeah, it does, Sarah. I mean, and then I think, and Dan's sitting there right next to you, I think, we're at, 90%. It varies from farm to farm. And so for us, it's been a lot of reallocation and looking at things that are maybe not as high a priority, or trying to shift roles to reallocate that time. Absolutely, it'd make you think about that. I guess our answer would be we'd like to get where we're supposed to be first and start working on that. But really for us, it's been a reallocation of processes, and really had us look hard at, are there things that really aren't helping us improve performance versus really focusing on this, and that's been helpful.
So, sorry, it's me again. One more question. So on the intervention study that you did, was there any reduction? You had 3 mortality categories, you know, the lameness and downers, the sudden deaths, and the prolapses. Was there any specific area where there was a remarkable reduction in mortality with the you know, more strategic approach to being preventative?
Yeah, and the ones that we measured, we just measured it across all the total, but I'll probably pass this over to Noel. He might
Yeah.
be able to look at it, because you
It
guys have that
would
report.
be very similar to the response on that one farm. About half as many lames, and I showed you the data on prolapses. Those were the 2 things that improved the most for us.
Do we have one more?
I've got a question for you, Noel. It looks like you've showed a pretty interesting quarter on prolapses with a reduction. I know we've tried that in some instances. Was there any other change in just feed intake?
I think, yeah, and it's always, I wish I knew exactly what it was, because I'd do more of it. I do believe in you know, I think Lee had his data in there that pre-farrow period is critical, and then post-farrow. I do think we're doing a much better job of identifying at-risk sows, off-feed sows in that area. I do believe that the feeding level has helped. Maybe it's just because we're identifying those and treating those and doing some sort of intervention. So I don't know, but I do. We did change the feed levels, and I do believe we're doing a lot better job of identifying at-risk sows, and I think those things have helped.
All right, well, it's a little after 3. I'm guessing there's some coffee or snacks out there. Thank you, everybody.